Adam Burke joins me over here on the desk, VSiN.com managing editor, and who just finished up a labor of love that is the 90-plus page NFL betting guide, officially having dropped at, I believe, midnight this morning. So how are you feeling now that this is finally out there for the world?
Well, it's always good to get these out there, right? I mean, these are our biggest selling points to our subscribers, the thing that they probably like the most that we do throughout the course of the year. And, I'm relieved to have one out, but I've already started the college football guide, which comes out Tuesday, August 5th. So, you just move from one thing to the next at this time of the year because things start to ramp up for the football season. But before we dive into the guide and what's in there, I got to give some shout outs here. I actually took a vacation in June this year. I'm not accustomed to taking vacations, but I took one this year. And I was able to do that because I can leave things in the very trusted hands of my senior editor, Zachary Cohen, who did a fantastic job directing traffic, editing all the content for the guide. Same thing with our editor, Michael Dolan. Matt Devine, great layout once again. James Coleman, Jimmy, downstairs, great job with the cover. So I'm really, really fortunate to have a great editorial and design team. And of course, we get a lot of buy-in from hosts like you, Stormy, that, send in best bets, send in the division winners, all of that. So I think this is the best guide we've ever put out. I'm going to say that about every guide we put out, but I really, truly think this is the best guide we've put out. And it's because we have so many great contributors helping me out with it.
Well, every year, everyone gets better and better, Adam, and everyone knows how to tweak things the following season. However, for you, being the main person working on this, how long does the NFL betting guide take to put together?
So I would say, from conception in terms of what we want to do with feature articles, obviously there's going to be some stuff that's in there year after year, and the team previews are always in there as well, and, those are a big selling point of the guide as well. But, it's probably a 6 to 8 week process, in terms of deciding which features we want, who's going to write what, making sure that I navigate around people having vacations, in the summertime, because this is a little bit slower, I guess, in the minds of a lot of people. So, the one thing that we do is we try to really stagger when the content comes in so that we have time to thoroughly and properly edit it, but also in terms of formatting, not having to do it all at once. So, in terms of conception to actually releasing it, 6 to 8 week process. And that's the thing about the college football one. We have a shorter window because of getting the NFL one done. So it's crunch time on that one, but I fully expect us to have our best version of the college football guide for sure.
And I do want to just give you guys credit too. It's not easy because yes, all of us as hosts, we contribute to the guide, but you give us a deadline, and more often than not, a lot of us are bleeding that right up to the wire. I got 24 hours though this year, Ariel. Last time I was like counting down the minutes. I got 24 hours ahead of the deadline. I was pretty impressed with myself.
I was impressed with you too. And also JVT, your co-host here on Money Moves usually, but yeah, I mean, you know what? We got phenomenal contributions from our hosts. And, there's over 100 best bets in between that. And then also we separated some of the individual awards markets, MVP, offensive and defensive rookie of the year, coach of the year. There's over 100 best bets from the voices and the faces that you hear and see on VSiN, and then also my writing staff over at VSiN.com. So if you want action, we've given you plenty of it here in the 2025 NFL betting guide.
So can you talk through that a little bit more? Because yes, there are a ton of bets that a lot of us have put in our own individual research and thought into leans that we have, but there are also just great core articles in there to help you get set for whether it is a team you want more information on, a style of betting that you want to get in on. So can you explain some of that?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I will say there are a couple of teams across the best bets that people really like, one of them being your San Francisco 49ers.
Yeah.
But, I mean, look, there's a lot of different ways to go about this process, right? In terms of Ariel, I was listening before I came on for a couple of segments. She's looking to really attack the prop markets. Other people are looking to attack season win total markets or maybe, championship future markets, things like that. So there's a lot of different ways to attack this, not only in terms of the bets that you choose to make, but also how you get to those decisions. So, we see things like Steve Makinen's systems that are, tried and true over a long period of time. He has a giant database of basically, this is why, teams that are in this situation get better the next year. This is why teams in this situation get worse the next year. And he's able to sort of use those things, springboard off of that, and come up with the 4 season win total bets that he has in our NFL betting guide. I looked at the new kickoff rules from last year, how field position changed, what happened in terms of third down success rate, how that led to more scoring last season. Things that you can't really act on now, but you're going to be able to act on as the season goes along. So there's just so many different ways to approach every betting market. And I think we covered kind of the gamut here in this guide.
Adam, for people that are going to look at this packet and see 94 pages, this is so daunting. How would you advise people to start?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's kind of what do you want to know about first, right? Do you want to know what we think about your favorite team or about your favorite team's division? Or, are there some positions where, you kind of want some confirmation in terms of what it is that you're already thinking? Or maybe, you kind of want that dissenting opinion and get both sides of a bet that you're looking at or a team that you want to buy in on or fade. So I think you want to go to what interests you the most at first and see if that kind of falls in line with what you're thinking, and then start to expand your horizons, broaden out a little bit, and start looking at some of the other stuff, maybe some of the things that you haven't thought about, like some of those awards markets that are in there, like Zach's article on who could be this year's Broncos/Commanders, where those are two teams that really overperformed last year in the minds of a lot of people. To some degree, you could say they overachieved, but there may also be some staying power to those two teams. So who are the potential candidates for this season that could be in that type of boat? So, again, I think you start with what you're most interested in, and then you kind of branch out and start looking at some of the things that maybe you haven't thought about so far this offseason.
Yeah, team division previews. You mentioned your colleague Zach Cohen, who did a lot of great work on here. He's got a write-up on teams with sleeper appeal. You had a great article called Alternate Beliefs, which I want to know some of your takeaways from that, because while we talk so much about season win totals and what that standard core number is for people to bet over or under on, there are also a lot of alternate total numbers that are available. And it seemed like there were some pretty big takeaways from you going through that data.
Yeah, so look, I mean, sports betting markets are really efficient, right? We know that the markets are very, very smart. They have all kinds of data, not only in terms of the team and player performances, but also the data of how their clientele is betting into these different markets. But it can be extremely difficult to predict out a team's full season. Now, obviously, you can't account for injuries, right? Those things are going to happen. Starting quarterbacks out for the year. A team's obviously going to fall well short of their expectations in most situations. But this is a market where I think betting alternate season win totals, there's a lot of opportunity to go out there and look at some of these numbers that, maybe if the market is over under 9.5, you play an 8.5, you play a 7.5, something like that, because there's a lot of situations, and I wrote about this in the guide. There's a list in the guide as well over the last 3 seasons where the market or where the closing line was plus or minus 1.5, plus or minus 2.5, or plus or minus 3.5 wins off of what a team's actual record was. Last year specifically, 13 of the 32 NFL teams were plus or minus 3.5 wins off of their closing season win total number. So there are some opportunities out there to bet into this market. Drew Dinsick, who's a regular guest with Gil, and he's on the Megapod and all of that. This is something that he's been talking about for several years now, and something that I've actually really started to dive into as a result of hearing it from him. I think he's one of the sharpest guys in the industry. I think it's really intriguing to see how many teams fall so far off of their season win total line that there's got to be some money to be made in that market. And again, that's why I think you want to use this guide to find some of those teams that maybe we agree that you're really high on, or maybe we agree that you're really low on, and look at some of these alternate win total markets.
Fantasy sports obviously so huge, and you guys have implemented some fantasy into this packet. Despite, of course, we do a lot of betting here, they go hand in hand, though. Adam, what can people expect on the fantasy side?
Yeah, so there are 2 terrific articles in here, and also, I mean, visually, they're stunning the way that Matt Devine put them together in this guide. So John Hansen, who was, of course, the host of Prop Points during the NFL season, and also Ryan Heath, both of those guys over at Fantasy Points, they put together a couple of articles for us here on stats to look at in terms of not only where you want to draft these guys with your upcoming fantasy drafts or your best ball drafts or something like that, but also some of the season-long prop markets that are out there, because there are a lot of individual player markets for over-under rushing yards, over-under receiving yards, over-under passing yards, touchdowns, things of that sort. So they use their fantasy knowledge and their fantasy info to branch off of that and look at some bets that you can make in terms of the season-long props. So I thought John and Ryan did an excellent job with that. Thank you to Scott Barrett over at Fantasy Points for helping coordinate that. 2 really, really good inclusions in this year's guide. And again, fantasy is not something that we've really tackled in this guide before, but I think the carryover and the crossover between playing fantasy and betting prop markets is very, very much, part of the part of the process now for people that bet.
And I can attest on the VSiN Pro Football Tailgate show that we had every Sunday this year, John Hansen, I mean, they call him the guru for a reason when it comes to fantasy. He would come on with us every Sunday and just dole out winners in the prop markets because he understands so well those players from a fantasy perspective. So in the guide, it was a really great correlative article showing how these projections can make for an over or underachiever based on some of those prop numbers. Talking all things NFL betting guide with the official release earlier this morning. Training camp's just a couple weeks away. Are you guys doing, and I've been teasing it as such, so I would hope so, a refresh once again like we did last year after training camps are through?
Yeah, we will be doing a refresh after training camp. I mean, you got to get through training camp healthy, right? And then once you get to that point, and we see, how some guys are deployed in the preseason, stuff like that, then, you can hone in on some of the bets that you want to make for the season, whether it's week 1 or some more of your future stuff. So, yeah, we will be doing a refresh guide. I don't have a date on that. It'll probably be the last week of August would be my guess. But again, the college football guide comes out August 5th, so I got to figure that one out first.
When you put together this packet and you saw, we were laughing in the last segment, Stormy and I, about how sometimes you'll see, for example, in the packet, the Buffalo Bills, everybody chose them to win the division. Was there a team that everybody you felt was super high on that you weren't expecting?
In terms of, super high, I mean, I'm high on them too, but I was a little bit surprised to see how many people also preferred Denver over the Chargers in the AFC West. I mean, when you look at our selections for the division winners, 14 still taking the Chiefs, 6 taking the Broncos, 6 taking the Chargers, nobody taking the poor Raiders. But I was a little bit surprised that people kind of felt the way that I did about Denver and weren't really prioritizing the Chargers in that division because I mean, obviously you've got Justin Herbert. You've got a Chargers team that's very, very strong if they're able to stay healthy. The Broncos, though, I think people just really, really respect that defense, which honestly could be even better this season than it was last year. And if you look at Bo Nix, he was really good after the first 3 games of the season. So I do think that, once again, and a lot of us thought this last year, too, that the Chiefs were starting to feel vulnerable. Yeah. And Mahomes was awful in the regular season, and they still made it to the Super Bowl. So we'll see if we're right this year and thinking the Chiefs are vulnerable. But, again, you have 12 of our 26 experts not taking the Chiefs to win the AFC West. So there's definitely a sentiment there that maybe Kansas City's dynasty in the AFC and specifically the AFC West is starting to crumble a little bit.
Yeah, not selected in the AFC West and then 0 picks for them to win the AFC. And we talked about this yesterday. We did, in honor of being 10 Sundays away from the official start of the NFL season, we did kind of our top 10 questions going into the year, one of them being, will the Chiefs finally take that step back? Because I feel like it's been a handful of years now that we have been predicting that they're going to fall off of this pedestal and that yet it never seems to happen. They're minus 120 favorites in the division right now, and I think you have to price them that way for having won it 9 straight times and still having Patrick Mahomes and so many of those pieces that have gone on the Super Bowl runs. But could this be the year that whether it be the Broncos or the Chargers take that step? I actually really like the Chargers. I like the Bolts and what Jim Harbaugh is bringing over there too.
Well, and I think another thing about Kansas City is the gap has closed now, right? I mean, for a while, it felt like Kansas City was just the clear class of the AFC West. But with Sean Payton, with the things that he's been able to do, I mean, he handpicked Bo Nix. Clearly, he thought that he had something there in him to run his offense. And, for the most part, it worked out really well last year. And then also with the Chargers, with Harbaugh coming in, you kind of had the chargering thing with Brandon Staley and, some of the previous guys. Harbaugh's a guy that's won, at every level. Yep. So, I think there's a lot of people that sort of believe in both the Broncos and the Chargers, where just because the gap is closed with Kansas City. But I agree with you. I mean, you have to give them that level of respect. And also, we just talked about it. Mahomes was not good in the regular season, but that defense was fantastic. So they're still going to have a good defense again, thanks to Spags. So you have to kind of respect that and price that in still, too.
Going over to the NFC, I know that Minnesota has their quarterback, J.J. McCarthy, who's finally coming after season-ending injury last year, and we never got to see him. How do you look at the Minnesota Vikings compared to teams that we are more certain about, like the Packers and the Lions?
I mean, look, I think you look at the guide, and I mean, 2 people picked the Vikings to win the NFC North. I think there's a lot of question about J.J. McCarthy. Personally, I wasn't impressed with him at all in college, and that's not just because I'm an Ohio State fan. He didn't have to do much. There were some games he didn't even throw the ball in the second half. So what is he going to do when he gets into an NFL game where he's got to win on that last drive or be able to at least move the football enough to avoid giving it back when you have a lead, stuff like that. I think there's a lot of questions about that. Obviously, the team around him is very, very good, and Kevin O'Connell's an outstanding head coach, but 23 of our 26 experts taking either the Packers or the Lions. And you asked me if there was a team that I thought I was a little bit surprised about that a lot of people liked. I'm surprised that so many people still like the Lions. Now, I do, and I think Dan Campbell at 22-1 is a good bet to win Coach of the Year. But there's a lot of negative sentiment around the Lions because they lost both their coordinators. And all the talk is Ben Johnson is this genius. He's this offensive guru. He's this, he's that. Look how Jared Goff played under him. Maybe this team's just good. Maybe Dan Campbell is just a good head coach. And, not much is going to change with the coordinators and the way that they kind of shifted everybody around. So I think these schemes are going to be very similar. But I was surprised to see a lot of people that still liked the Lions in spite of, what the narrative has been all offseason long.
And we will talk so much NFL throughout the course of the week with this guide coming out, have a bunch of guests on talking about these different articles and stuff, but so appreciative of all the work that you and your crew have done. Again, this is out now, VSiN.com/subscribe. When you're a subscriber, we've got this football early bird special going on for $175. You get everything we have to offer here at VSiN. So that is daily best bets from all of our hosts and guests, access to the betting splits, all of the video content, unlimited articles, and you get the guide that, quite frankly, is worth the price in itself for just this one document, all the prep you get for the NFL season. But all of that up right now at VSiN.com/subscribe.
And something else I want to mention, while this is called the football special, the fact that it runs through the Super Bowl means you get the NBA guide,
yes,
the NHL guide, the college basketball guide. So while we're calling this the football special, it's not like you only get football content.
Yeah.
You're going to get multiple guides throughout the course of the season, and of course our Super Bowl guide. So, you're getting a lot of stuff across a lot of sports where things are very busy in September, October, November, December, all of that. So, yes, it's called the football special, but you're getting all 6 major North American sports here in this guide.
It's awesome.
Or in this offer.